His LinkedIn banner showed him smiling in front of a booth I designed. Same poster, same pitch line, same damn font. Only difference was his face. Confident, clean-shaven, like he'd earned the spotlight. My hands were still calloused from building the prototype that got him there. My name's Eric Delaney. I'm 34, live in Oakland, and until last year, I thought loyalty counted for something in business. I wasn't trying to be the next Elon or Zuckerberg. I didn't care about chasing VC rounds or press features. All I wanted was to build something honest, something that came from me. I'd spent most of my 20s clocking in and out of startup garages, watching other guys raise money off back-of-napkin concepts while I soldered their wires and debugged their apps. By 29, I'd saved just enough to risk a one-bedroom lease and go full-time on an idea I'd been nursing for years, a modular charging system for cyclists. I'd watched bike commuters fumble with power banks, get stranded with dead phones, or waste cash on clunky gear. What I wanted to build was sleek, lockable, weatherproof. A little smart. Something you could pop onto any bike frame and forget about. I called it Loop Charge. Short, clean. The kind of name you could see etched into aluminum. The first guy I brought in was Noah Kraus, and that was my first mistake. We met at a networking mixer in Berkeley. I was pitching the early prototype, just hoping to find a fabricator or someone with decent electrical chops. Noah wasn't either of those. He was more of a strategy and scale type, which should have been my second red flag. But he was charismatic, tall, kind of preppy, with a dry voice and good posture. Said he had an MBA from Stanford. He didn't. Knew angel investors in Palo Alto. He didn't. And had experience launching hardware startups. He sort of did, more like flamed out of one after a year. Still, he knew how to talk. He asked good questions, and more importantly, he listened. I had a cardboard and wire prototype and some ugly sketches. He saw potential. Loop Charge, he repeated, testing the name out loud like it already existed. I like that. You should build a pitch deck. I don't have a deck, I admitted. I have this. I held up the prototype. And like 6 pages of handwritten notes. He smiled. That's more real than 90% of the people in this room. That was how it started. Noah became my unofficial co-founder before I even realized I'd agreed to it. He started showing up to my place on weekends, always with coffee, sometimes with donuts. He brought his iPad, helped clean up my branding, threw out phrases like user acquisition funnel and go-to-market matrix. It was mostly fluff, but it sounded sharp. I was spending my time building, refining the battery, testing the lock mechanism, iterating the casing to survive Oakland rain. He made slide decks, sent outreach emails, created a logo that looked suspiciously AI-generated but passable. At first, it felt like a team. I was the hands, he was the mouth. We even registered an LLC together, Loop Charge Inc. I used Stripe Atlas for the paperwork, put both our names on the founding documents. 50-50. I was naive. I admit that now. We set a launch goal, build 5 functional units, get 20 pre-orders, and apply for a local startup grant. That grant was everything to me. $10,000, just enough to scale the enclosure. Maybe get a small manufacturing run. I prepped for 3 weeks straight. And that's when the first weird thing happened. I got a rejection email from the city startup program. Polite, generic. We appreciate your time and effort, etc. But something about the wording felt off. They referred to a competing application with significantly similar scope and branding. I thought that maybe another bike startup beat us to the punch. Disappointed but not suspicious. Not yet, until 2 weeks later, when one of my old colleagues from a hardware meetup forwarded me a newsletter. Subject line, Introducing Veloc Charge, Smart Mobility for Cyclists. Same product category, same design aesthetic. Even the deck layout was eerily familiar. But the name, Veloc Charge, it hit me like ice water down the back. That was the second name I had brainstormed. One I'd mentioned to Noah, just once, when we were spitballing names before settling on Loop Charge. And there he was, Noah Kraus, founder and CEO. I didn't confront him immediately. I wanted proof. I spent that night comparing the two pitch decks. His was cleaner, sure. Polished graphics, better photos. But the concept, word for word, mine. Down to the universal locking rail and the auto-calibrating solar module. Two terms I literally made up. I checked the grant database. There it was, Veloc Charge, listed as a finalist. Noah had submitted under a separate company. One he didn't list when we registered Loop Charge. I couldn't sleep. My chest buzzed with a sick, hollow vibration, like standing too close to a subwoofer. The next morning, I called him. He answered like nothing was wrong. Eric, what's up, man? You got a minute? Sure. Everything okay? Did you apply to the startup grant without me? Pause. He sighed. Okay. I figured this might come up. You figured? Look, I didn't know if you were still serious about Loop Charge. You've been kind of buried in the hardware. We weren't really moving. Are you kidding me right now? I submitted a version of the idea with a different name, just to test the waters. It's not personal. You stole our entire concept. It's a shared concept. We were 50-50, right? I didn't even answer. I hung up. Then I walked into the tiny corner of my apartment that passed for an office, pulled out the Loop Charge trademark application I'd started 6 months earlier, and never filed. Here's something most people don't know. Registering a trademark isn't expensive. If you're doing it solo and have your design locked, it can cost less than $300 through the USPTO, and the name Loop Charge, still available, still unclaimed. Veloc Charge was too. Technically, he hadn't trademarked it. He'd only used it for the grant and a one-page landing site. So I did something petty. I filed 2 applications, one for Loop Charge and one for Veloc Charge, under his name. It wasn't hard. The USPTO doesn't ask for photo ID up front. You need a mailing address, a signature, which can be digital, and a statement of use. I forged a generic product description, attached an image from the early prototype, and listed Noah A. Kraus as the applicant. I used a third-party legal filing service that allowed on-behalf applications. Technically legal if you're an authorized representative. I wasn't, but I checked the box anyway. Was it risky? Absolutely, but I needed time. I wasn't going to publish anything. I wasn't going to sell it under that name. All I wanted was a hold, a pause button on his ability to go public with what was essentially my work. 2 months later, the trademark status updated, pending review. Under his name. The real kicker came during a pitch showcase at the WeWork near Embarcadero. I went to support a friend's VR project. Wasn't even thinking about Noah until I saw the printed schedule. Veloc Charge, Noah Kraus, booth 14. I stood in line for coffee for 20 straight minutes, debating whether to walk over. When I finally did, he didn't recognize me at first. He was wearing a branded hoodie, Veloc Charge embroidered across the chest, and talking to 2 angel investors, giving them the full treatment. Battery integrates with any standard down tube, solar panels on the side, patent pending. I interrupted. Patent pending, huh? He looked up, froze. Oh, Eric. The investors looked confused. Noah forced a laugh. This is one of our early contributors. Founder, I corrected. I pulled out my phone and opened the USPTO portal. Nice hoodie, I said, loud enough for the investors to hear. Did you ever get clearance to use that mark? He blinked. What? Your trademark, I said, flashing the screen. I filed it last month. Under your name, actually. Now they were both watching him. One of them raised an eyebrow. Noah turned red. "Can we talk?" "Sure," I said. "Just not here." I left him standing there, caught between two investors and a technicality he didn't see coming. It wasn't revenge, not yet, but it was leverage, and I was just getting started. It was 6:28 on a Monday morning when the email hit. Subject line: Trademark Review Update. Velux Charge. TM. I was microwaving day-old rice, still in gym shorts, still trying to decide whether to go to the co-working space or just stew at home again. Then I saw the phrase, "Initial refusal issued due to applicant identity inconsistency." And I knew the clock just started ticking. Let me back up. After the showcase, Noah didn't contact me for 10 days. I thought he might storm over, demand I cancel the filing, maybe even threaten legal action. But nothing. No calls, no emails, not even a passive-aggressive LinkedIn post. It made me nervous. That silence told me one thing. He was trying to find a workaround. You see, people like Noah, they don't like conflict unless they control the optics. If there's no audience, they stall. They strategize. They try to spin the story before you can open your mouth. So when that email came from the USPTO noting inconsistency between applicant identity and known commercial representative, I figured he'd tried to actually trademark the name himself and tripped the system. Now the agency had two applications, one submitted by me under his name and one by himself, probably unaware of what I'd done. And that was the moment I realized I had leverage, but it was unstable. It could blow up either way. I wasn't trying to destroy him. Not at first. All I wanted was acknowledgement. Maybe an apology. Maybe, and this felt ridiculous even as I thought it, maybe he'd realize what he did was messed up and offer to fold the project back in with a shared credit. But the moment passed. That window for reconciliation, it slammed shut 2 days later when a cease and desist letter showed up at my mailbox. Typed, sealed, from a firm in Mountain View. It was addressed to Eric Delaney, DBA Loop Charge LLC, which meant he hadn't just tried to erase me. He'd done his research, knew the structure, knew where to hit. I read it on the front steps of my apartment. The air smelled like burnt rubber and eucalyptus, classic Oakland mix. The letter accused me of fraudulent misrepresentation, unauthorized application submission, and reputational sabotage. He even quoted our old group chat messages, claimed I'd informally relinquished my share by not objecting when he said he'd try a solo version. I laughed, out loud, bitter and short. That was his strategy? Wordplay and screenshots? He wanted war? Fine. Here's the part where I admit something I'm not proud of. I knew Noah's passwords, or rather, his patterns. Back when we worked together, we shared a Notion doc with vendor logins, sample copy, marketing tools. He reused a base password across platforms. I knew because he typoed it one day on the Loop Charge backend, and I'd memorized the correction. He wasn't malicious back then, just lazy. So I ran an experiment. I tried logging into the Velux Charge MailChimp account, using a derivative of his old password with a 23 at the end. It worked. There it was, a subscriber list of 200, a draft campaign labeled July pre-launch, and a content calendar with my copy pasted nearly word for word from our old Loop Charge marketing blurbs. Now I was angry. Not just insulted. He hadn't just stolen the name. He'd stolen the feel, the entire emotional frame we built. He was using my voice, my pacing, the freedom to ride farther tagline that came out of a late-night conversation over whiskey and cheap Thai food. So I did something I knew would leave a trail. I created a new draft campaign in the MailChimp account. Subject line: This is what theft looks like. Inside, A full screenshot of our original loop charge notes, dated, signed, and saved to Google Drive, compared side by side with his pitch deck. I didn't send it, just saved it as a draft. Then I logged out and waited. 3 days later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. San Jose area code. I picked up. Eric? His voice was quieter than usual. Flat, no bravado. Yeah, we need to talk. I stayed silent. Look, I saw what you left in the MailChimp. You made your point. Noah, I said, what do you want? I'm trying to salvage the project. Investors are asking questions. I didn't think it would get this messy. You didn't think it would get messy, I repeated. After you filed a cease and desist? I was advised to. You forced my hand. I barked a short laugh. I forced your hand? There was a pause. He sighed. Look, he said, what would it take to settle this quietly? Public retraction, I said instantly. Full statement. Admit the origin, give me co-founder credit, and transfer half the IP rights back. He hesitated. That's a lot. You can say no, I said. Just know the alternative is public receipts. I've got timestamps, design files, LLC records, chat logs. Another pause. This isn't what I wanted, he said, almost to himself. I know, I replied. You wanted my idea without me in it. Click. I didn't hear from him for another week. During that time, I got a call from someone I never expected to hear from again. Gavin Reese, one of the early-stage fund managers who'd passed on loop charge back in the day. He'd seen the trademark debacle playing out online. Apparently, a small write-up had hit a tech blog, noting the Velic charge identity dispute and raising questions about the legitimacy of the brand. Gavin wanted to talk. He invited me to coffee at his office near Lake Merritt. I went, mostly out of curiosity. Gavin was sharper than I remembered. Older Gen X guy, minimalist desk, AirPods always dangling from his shirt. So, he said, after small talk, you planning to sue? Not yet, I said, but you filed the marks. Yep, both. He nodded. You know, the investors Noah pitched to? They're worried. They don't want to back a product tied up in IP drama. I raised an eyebrow. Then they should have done due diligence. He smiled. That's why I'm calling. They want to buy you out. That caught me off guard. He slid a folder across the table. Inside, a proposal. 25 grand for peaceful withdrawal and full release of claim. I closed it without reading further. Not enough, I said. Think carefully, he replied. This is a gesture to make you go away, not to validate you. If you push harder, they'll just bury the product. I am the product, I said. He shrugged. Then go make your own version, just not with their name. I left the meeting 10 minutes later, but I took the folder with me. That night, I made a decision. No more waiting, no more leverage games. I was going to rebuild Loop Charge, from scratch if I had to, but I wasn't going to do it alone. I reached out to a guy I hadn't spoken to in over a year. Manny Salgado, former industrial designer for a bike brand that folded during the pandemic. Smart, practical, zero interest in corporate politics. We'd once sketched out a prototype together in a Burger King booth during a power outage. He picked up right away. Eric? He said, surprised. Damn, man. I saw that Velic charge mess online. That you? Yeah. Want to help me make a better one? He didn't even pause. Hell yes. What's the plan? I told him everything. About the trademark. About Noah. About the offer they tried to slide across the table. And then I said, but we're doing it different this time. No split equity without sweat equity. No ghost decks. No fake buzzwords. Manny laughed. You always had a problem trusting smooth talkers. Yeah, I said. Now I know why. We met that weekend at my apartment. I cleared off the folding table I used as a desk and laid out the original loop charge guts. Battery, lock, cable, Plastic shell. Manny looked at it all and said, "Let's gut the lock. Go magnetic. Less friction. We can mount it to the seat post and do a frame clamp variation for thicker bars." I nodded. "What about solar?" He made a face. "Let's focus on USB-C fast charge first. Solar can be version 2. You want stability, not Kickstarter gimmicks." He was right. By Monday, we had a roadmap. And the new name? Fluxband. Clean, simple, trademark available. I filed it that night, under my name. The next morning, I got a single-line text from Noah. "You won. Happy?" I stared at it for a long time, typed out a reply, deleted it, and said nothing. Because this wasn't about winning, it was about building, again. But this time, with my own hands, and the right people beside me. The aluminum casing felt cold against my palm, the matte finish still smudged with fingerprints from the first field test. I turned it over slowly, inspecting the weld seam near the charging port. Not perfect, not pretty, but ours. Manny nodded across the table. "First one off the line always feels heavier." I didn't tell him it wasn't the metal. It was everything we carried to get here. I never thought I'd say this, but nothing will humble you faster than trying to do honest manufacturing in a post-pandemic America. We weren't even aiming big. No angel funding, no fake wait lists, no crypto nonsense launch schemes. Just 50 functional units, a clean spec sheet, and a price point that didn't insult working cyclists. Fluxband was real. We had a CAD model, a build partner in Richmond, and, thanks to Manny's connections, a discounted slot with a small batch CNC shop. All we needed now was time, sweat, and maybe a miracle or two to get through the initial ramp-up. But in the background, Noah was still everywhere. The weird thing about being betrayed by someone who thrives online is that you start seeing their face in places you never consented to. Noah hadn't backed down after the trademark debacle. He'd just pivoted. Hard. The Velic Charge name quietly disappeared. No statement, no apology, not even a "we've rebranded." Just gone. In its place was something sleeker, more aggressive. Spinamp. Same product, same specs. But now wrapped in aggressive startup hype. Edgy logos. AI-generated founder portraits. A video that opened with our old script, reworded but recognizable. Power your freedom. Own your ride. It made me sick. But what made it worse was the press. They loved it. I watched Tech Hub Weekly call it an elegant solution for urban cyclists. Watched a YouTuber with 800K subs test the prototype on camera. The same prototype I'd wired and assembled by hand 18 months ago. He didn't mention loop charge. Didn't mention me. Just a casual, Spinamp's founder says the product was inspired by commuting frustrations during grad school. Grad school? Noah never rode a bike in his life. Manny kept me grounded. "Let it go," he said. "You're playing a longer game." Easy to say when he's getting retweets and VC lunches. Who do you want to impress? TechCrunch or customers who actually ride? He was right. So we shut the blinds, ordered cheap pad thai, and got back to building. Our first test unit failed in a dumb way. Not the electronics, those held. It was the latch mechanism. We'd designed a magnetic hinge to click onto a bike frame, but under pressure, it twisted just enough to disconnect the internal charger. Half the juice, double the frustration. Manny stared at the busted unit, chewing on a pencil. We overestimated tolerances. Or underestimated user rage, I added. We didn't sleep that night. By morning, we had a new clamp system modeled in SketchUp and 3 revised housings printing on my buddy's resin machine in Daly City. No fanfare, no press. Just 2 guys making things real. Around that time, I started documenting everything. Not for legal reasons, but because I needed to remember what building felt like. The actual act of it. Photos, notes, dates. Fluxband build log, V1.0, April 14th, failed latch. April 15th, Manny suggests reinforced clamp. April 17th, resin print arrives. April 19th, successful lock under 180-degree pressure. April 21st, first road test, Manny's battered Cannondale. April 23rd, charging endurance confirmed, 2.6 miles with music, GPS, lights, small wins, quiet victories. Meanwhile, Spinamp was launching pre-orders with a wait list and hype. I ignored it as long as I could until a post from my cousin popped up on Instagram. It was a repost from Spinamp's official account. Caption, proud to support my friend's amazing new startup. Photo, Noah holding my casing design, unchanged, just anodized, smiling next to a sign that said, featured in Technova's top 50 mobility startups. That was it. I snapped. I called Noah. Straight up, no warning. He picked up. Eric, you still using my shell design? He hesitated. We made some modifications. No, you didn't. I just saw the video. That's my layout, my mold, even the damn screw orientation. He sighed. I'm within my rights. You never patented the design? No, but I documented it thoroughly, and I've got timestamps going back 2 years. Then sue me, he said flatly. But you'll run out of cash before I run out of lawyers. Pause. You know, I said, voice low, one day you're going to be on a panel, maybe at a conference, maybe some TEDx nonsense, and someone's going to ask you about originality. And in that moment, I hope you remember the silence you're building your empire on. He didn't respond. I hung up. Manny and I spent the next 2 weeks preparing for a direct launch. Quiet, local, real. We partnered with 3 independent bike shops, 2 in Oakland, 1 in Emeryville. No online splash, no newsletter. Just a demo booth, a QR code, and a simple ask. Try it for 2 weeks. If it breaks, we'll replace it. If you love it, tell a friend. The first guy to test it was a 22-year-old college student named Jamal. Rode a steel frame Schwinn with 2 bungee cords and a duct-taped tail light. He came back after a week. This thing's sick, man. My phone didn't die once. Even got a text during a storm. Still charged. I looked at Manny. He grinned. That moment? Better than press. Then came the call from the City Mobility Council. Someone, still don't know who, had nominated Fluxband for a community grant supporting local transportation innovation. Nothing huge. Just $3,000 plus a spotlight at the Spring Transit Expo. I didn't even apply. But when they asked if we'd attend, I said yes. They gave us booth 8. You'll never guess who had booth 9. Spinamp. That morning, I showed up in jeans and a gray hoodie with the Fluxband logo ironed on crooked. Manny was wearing oil-stained cargo pants and a ball cap that said, "Design is a verb." Our booth had a folding table, 2 demo units, and a handwritten poster board that said, "Simple, tough, works." Noah's booth, custom canopy, backlit display, interns in branded polos. But guess what? Most people stopped at ours because we let people touch the product. Clip it on, snap it off, see it charge. No jargon, no fake specs. Noah passed by once, didn't stop, just glanced sideways, then kept walking. Later that day, a city rep tapped me on the shoulder. "We're doing a highlight video. Mind giving a 30-second soundbite?" I nodded. When the camera rolled, I said, "We're just 2 local guys who wanted to make bikes better. No pitch deck, no buzzwords, just gear that works." That clip went modestly viral, but more importantly, it reached the inbox of a regional outdoor gear distributor. They reached out the next morning, said they wanted to talk. Let me be clear. We don't pick sides in legal disputes. That's what the distributor said as soon as we sat down. I could tell from his tone he'd already Googled both versions of the product. Could tell, too, that he wasn't here for the drama. But by the time I showed him what was inside our casing, his expression shifted from caution to interest. The meeting took place in the back office of a small gear store in Santa Rosa. Not exactly the showroom I'd imagined for Fluxband's first real distribution opportunity, but it felt right. No marble floors, no fake smiles, just a dusty mini fridge, a jar of pens that didn't work, and a guy named Leonard, who wore hiking boots even on hardwood. He was regional sales for a specialty outdoor retailer, not huge like REI, but respected by people who actually used the stuff they bought. Think, mechanics, rangers, year-round bike commuters, folks who could smell bullshit from 3 aisles away. Leonard examined the unit in his palm like he was weighing a knife. No flair, no compliments. "What's the return rate?" he asked. "0, I said, "but we've only deployed 12. Tested under rain? We did a downpour test on Manny's back porch, worked through 2 inches of standing water. Battery swelling? Frame rust? We seal the USB port with a silicone gasket, internally shielded from condensation. Plus the mounting rail doesn't scratch, it's powder-coated." He didn't nod. He just kept looking. Then he flipped it over, tapped near the serial number, and asked, "Who's manufacturing?" "Right now, a 3-person CNC shop in Richmond. You can scale that?" I didn't lie. "Not yet, but we can document every step." Leonard finally looked up. "Good. I hate black box suppliers." 2 days. Later, we had a pilot agreement in our inbox. 20 units, stocked in 5 stores, evaluated over 60 days. If even half of those sold and didn't come back, he'd double the order. I didn't whoop or fist pump, just forwarded it to Manny with one line: "We're on." And that same night, I got a Google alert. Title: Spinamp reschedules launch due to unforeseen production issues. The article was 2 paragraphs long, said something vague about a supply chain pivot, no mention of previous branding, no images of the prototype. But I knew what it meant. He was stalling. Probably because someone finally asked where the design came from. I'll admit, part of me wanted to kick him while he was down. I had receipts, CAD files, emails with metadata. I even had a Dropbox folder full of old voice notes where I ranted to myself while wiring circuits, most of them time-stamped during our co-founder days. I could have leaked it all, made a Medium post, contacted the blogs, given interviews. Even that city grant committee would have listened if I'd really pushed. But I didn't. Because for the first time since all this started, I wasn't thinking about Noah. I was thinking about Jamal, the student who'd used our prototype and told his friends. I was thinking about Leonard's quiet face as he turned over the casing like it mattered. I was thinking about building, not revenge. Still, I knew Noah wouldn't let things die. People like him don't fade quietly. They pivot. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, his LinkedIn profile changed again. No more founder, Spinamp. Now it read, Innovation Advisor, Urban Mobility, Public-Private Partnerships, Smart Infrastructure. He'd wormed his way into a consulting gig with a city mobility council, probably the same one that had given us the grant. I nearly laughed. He couldn't launch the product without lawsuits, so now he was trying to advise the people who funded the ones that did. It would have been pathetic if it weren't also strategic, because if he played it right, he could block people like me from future contracts, all while painting himself as above the noise. So I scheduled a meeting with the city's transit board. The appointment was short, just 20 minutes. The board was polite but stiff. 3 people, 1 tablet, no eye contact until the last 5 minutes. I brought the Fluxband, brought the receipts, showed them the timeline, the trademark, the grant paperwork, everything that traced development from my first prototype to the shelf. One of them, a younger guy named Theo, leaned forward when I played a short clip from Jamal talking about his ride. "He's the kind of commuter we want to reach," Theo said. "But what do you want from us?" "Clarity," I said, "and fairness. I'm not asking you to blacklist anyone, but if you're going to promote mobility solutions, start by checking who built them." They thanked me for my time. I walked out into the hallway, unsure if it mattered. But the next week, they updated the Public Innovation Partner page. Noah's name wasn't on it anymore. Manny and I fulfilled the pilot order in 3 weekend shifts and a single burrito-fueled all-nighter. We printed our own QR code cards, wrote setup instructions in plain English, even ran a test hotline using my personal phone in case anyone needed help. 3 weeks in, we had our first return, but not because it broke. The customer just lost the bike, which meant the product outlasted the frame. That was a win in our book. One night, while balancing invoices in my living room, I got a text from a number I didn't know. "You're going to leave me behind, huh?" No name, but I knew who it was. I didn't answer. A minute later, "I didn't think you'd actually pull it off." Then, "You still using my clamp design?" That one made me laugh. Because the truth was, we weren't. Manny had replaced the original clamp with a dual-rail grip that he'd built from a repurposed scooter mount. It was better, cleaner, and entirely his. So I replied with a photo. Just the new design. No words. 10 minutes later, he sent a thumbs-up emoji, and nothing else. By the end of spring, Leonard extended the contract, doubled the order, then doubled it again. We weren't rich. We weren't viral. But Fluxband was on real bikes, in real streets, used by people who didn't care about buzzwords, only that it worked. One of our customers, a middle-aged woman who rode 10 miles a day to clean houses, sent a handwritten note. It said, "This little thing means I get to call my kids after dark. Thank you." I pinned that note on the wall above my desk. It meant more than any headline ever could. But Noah wasn't done. Not yet. Because in late June, I got a letter, certified, from a new law firm. Subject: intent to file patent claim for competitive interference. It had one sentence that made my stomach turn. Our client asserts that core elements of the Fluxband mounting mechanism were conceived during his tenure as co-founder of LoopCharge LLC. I read it 3 times, then once more. He was trying to backdoor himself back in, not through trademark, not through product, but through a false history. And this time, he'd hired someone who knew how to make it look real. The envelope wasn't thick, just deliberate. Its corners were sharp. Too sharp for something that wasn't meant to cut. It sat on my desk for an hour before I opened it, like a dare, like a hand extended, or a trap being set. Inside wasn't just a legal threat. It was a rewritten version of our past. I scanned the letter 4 times, each line pulling me into a version of reality I didn't recognize. According to Noah's legal team, he was the originator of the clamp concept. Not me, not Manny. He claimed the early sketches came from co-founder brainstorming sessions, and that his notes, which I had never once seen, outlined the very mechanism we'd redesigned from scratch. There were citations, page numbers from documents I didn't know existed. One of them even referenced a shared Notion file that I had created, but that had been edited long after we stopped working together. I opened the version history. Sure enough, the clamp note had been added 6 weeks earlier, under his name. They were manufacturing evidence, or worse, retrofitting it just enough to create plausible confusion. That's all they needed, because in court, you don't need to prove the truth, you just need to muddy it. I called Manny. He picked up on the second ring like he already knew. "They sent you the claim?" "Yeah," Same here. He sounded calm, but clipped, focused. We need to sit down, tonight, I said. My place, he replied. Bring everything. Manny's apartment looked like a parts bin exploded. Screws, resin scraps, a busted drone, 2 half-finished prototypes of a bike-mounted coffee holder he swore would sell next Christmas. We cleared a space on the table and started tracing everything we had, from our first sketches to every single change made to the mounting system. Can he win this? Manny asked eventually, not looking up. Not if we prove we built the design independently. Can we? I nodded slowly. Yeah, but we'll need help. That's when I called Camila. Camila Santiago was a product engineer I'd met during a City Innovation Hackathon 2 years ago. She was honest, detail-obsessed, and, more importantly, she'd been in the room the night we brainstormed the real clamp redesign. She wasn't a co-founder. She wasn't even on the Fluxband team. But she remembered, and she kept notes. When I explained what was happening, she didn't hesitate. I have the sketch, she said. We drew it on that burrito wrapper, remember? I took a picture for my sketch archive. You still have that? Of course I do. I even tagged it. Manny's seat post idea, lock V2, time-stamped. Want the raw file? I exhaled, hard. Yes. 10 minutes later, she sent it, and just like that, we had a bulletproof origin record. But I wasn't done, because something Noah said in the original call stuck with me. The bit about my clamp design. He kept repeating it like a mantra, like he was trying to will it into fact. So I went back to my old hard drives, dug up a looped backup of our first group Zoom call after filing the LLC. It was recorded accidentally. I'd hit record during a screen share to save the demo. What I found stopped me cold. At one point, I shared my screen showing the loop charge prototype, casing only, and Noah said this, "So how does the mounting work?" I answered, "Still figuring that out. I want it to snap onto any frame, but the clamp's too bulky right now. I'll probably bring in Manny." Right there. His legal claim was that he designed the clamp with me before Manny, but that recording, that timestamp, it killed his whole story. We hired a small IP attorney in Alameda, someone who didn't wear suits and wasn't afraid of a courtroom. I gave her everything. Camila's sketch, the voice recording, our design evolution files, the Notion version history, and the early email where Noah had literally asked for a photo of the casing. She smiled when she saw the timeline. "This won't go to court," she said. "He'll drop it the moment discovery starts." She was right. 3 weeks after we filed the official counterclaim, Noah's firm sent a quiet withdrawal. No apology, no settlement, just a terse one-line memo. Client is electing not to pursue litigation at this time. That was it. The last attempt to rewrite our story, folded into itself. Manny bought a six-pack. We sat on his roof watching BART trains rattle past in the distance, cracked a beer, and didn't even toast. We didn't need to. We were still standing. That fall, Fluxband hit its 100th unit. Still no press, still no spotlight, just customers, real ones. A mechanic in San Mateo who said it let him take longer routes home. A retiree in Portland who finally got her GPS to last a whole ride. A 16-year-old kid in Sacramento who asked us to autograph his box. We did. In Sharpie, right over the logo. That same week, I finally let myself delete Noah's number from my phone. Not out of rage, out of peace. Because the story was no longer about what he stole. It was about what he couldn't take. The quiet persistence, the slow nights, the late meals, the real work, the honest build. If this story moved you, subscribe for more real-life confessions and emotional journeys like this one.